Hey, how's it going today?
Great, Billy. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Now, you are one of the minds behind some great films. God's Not Dead, you directed, Unbroken, Path to Redemption, and the list goes on. And I want to talk about those films, but I actually want to dig into your background because I know a lot of people love to sort of get a sense of, who's behind the camera, where did they come from? So take us through how you got, and I'm sure this is a loaded question, but how you got into Hollywood.
Oh, yes. It's a great question. So my dad was a public school superintendent, and my senior year in high school, I told my dad that I wanted to go to art college to be a filmmaker and an artist, and he said no.
It
And
didn't go over well, I
no,
take it.
no. But my dad was very wise, and he loved me and wanted to make sure that I had some sort of stability within my life. So it was actually amazing advice. So I went to college, got my art education degree, and I was a high school art teacher for a few years, and I used my summers off to pursue my passion for filmmaking and sculpture and the arts. And so it was great advice that my dad gave me.
Yeah, so you always had an interest, obviously, in art then, right? There's all different kinds of art, right? Filmmaking is one form of art, but this was something for you that I would imagine from an early age that intrigue and interest was there.
Yeah. I learned how to draw through comic books, through Stan Lee's book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Before Stan passed away, I actually got the opportunity to meet with him and say, "Hey, Stan, I just want you to know, man, you inspired the heck out of a kid from small town, rural Michigan, a town with one stoplight." And I was actually in Beverly Hills that day directing a commercial, and got to meet with him. And he gave me his personal business card for POW Comics with his cell phone number on it. And he said, "Let's get together." I'm like, oh my gosh, biggest regret is I never wanted to like call in that chip. I never wanted to be the guy to call him and say, "Hey, let's go, Stan." But he was just so respectful and kind. But yeah, so I learned how to draw through reading comic books, and I had a good art teacher when I was in elementary school, Mr. Hines. I don't know if Mr. Hines is still around, but I remember him plain as day. And so then I went on to college, and I really got involved with sculpture. I love sculpture, and then I realized that through my drawing skills and my sculpting skills, it was just building a bigger arena for me to tell stories in, because I've always viewed artists as storytellers, and so my skills kind of just led me into the film arena, where you're basically telling a story within a big sculpture.
Yeah, so let's talk about that too, because your dad's advice was really good advice. You're teaching. At what point do you say to yourself, all right, I want to now take that step into that dream, into that movie making, you mentioned commercials, into that Hollywood arena.
Yeah. So while I was teaching, I did a short film with a couple of friends, and through a school in Grand Rapids, Michigan. At the time, it was Compass College of Cinematic Arts, or Compass Film Academy. I did the short film, and we put together this little sizzle reel, and the college was very supportive. They provided some interns and some equipment, and it was a nothing, no budget film. But I was luckily had a couple of producers on it, Andy and Dave Phelps, who are really good friends of mine to this day, who really supported me as an artist and let me create some visuals. And through Compass Film Academy, they made a connection with Ralph Winter, who is the producer of the X-Men series from the 2000s. Incredible man, incredible guy. And I met with him actually in Los Angeles, and he looked at the teaser and he said, "You shot this in Michigan?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You really ought to consider this being a career. You should really think about moving to Los Angeles." And I knew as an art teacher that I very rarely would encourage any of my students to go on to art college unless I really saw something in their talent that gave me confidence that I wouldn't be pushing them in a wrong direction toward a false dream or goal. And I thought, wow, if Ralph's telling me that, that carries some weight. Um, so I talked to my lovely bride, and I said, "What do you think about this?" And she said, "Well, we should pray about it." And we did, and it's pretty amazing how things played out. Some things that we were very specific in our prayers about. Okay, if this is supposed to happen, God, we need, this is where we're at. This is what we would love to see happen. And um, God's never late, but He's also never
Yeah.
early.
Yeah.
God's
Yeah,
right
no,
on
that's so
time.
true. That's so
And
true, and I'm sure your career has shown you that.
oh my goodness, man! So about 2 days before we were supposed to sign our contracts for that next school year, we got a phone call that changed our lives. And literally, it was this domino effect of all of the things that we had prayed for just fell right into place. And we ended up in Los Angeles um, within 2 weeks.
Wow. Okay, so you end up in Los Angeles. You start on this path. Now, obviously, I remember because I was a journalist covering, God's Not Dead. I was covering the film and sort of the in the early moments of, okay, this movie is going to get pushed out. Could you have ever imagined, and I want to get into how you connected with God's Not Dead, but could you have ever imagined that that movie would have been as big as it was?
There, obviously, I don't think anybody in their wildest dreams would have expected it to be anointed the way it was. I will say that during the production, there was a moment where I pulled Mike Scott aside, and it was after it was after one of the it was after one of the performances. Well, I won't get into details on that, but I pulled Mike aside and I'm like, man, something is going on with this film, and I think I think we have something here, and I think it's going to be significant. But no one could have ever predicted the success that it had.
Yeah, I mean, it was monumental, the success of it. And so let's just backtrack a little bit again because I wanna
Sure.
make our way into God's Not Dead. So you end up in LA. You said it was 2 days before you were supposed to sign that contract. So that's a big leap of faith because you know for a fact, here's a guaranteed job that I have teaching, right?
Right.
But you go and you follow the dream. How long did it take for things to pick up for you in LA?
Um, it was when I got to LA. That's a great question, man. It's all kind of a blur at this point. But when I got to LA, all I know is that I took every single job I could in the entertainment industry to learn as much as I possibly could, as quickly as I possibly could. And I was and still am a voracious learner. As a teacher, you take that oath that you're going to be a learner for life, and that's something I take, excuse me, very seriously. And so I was able to get on a short film that was being done by NBC Universal as an assistant art director. So my art skills were one of the ways I got my entree into the industry. And then I became a production designer on a feature film shooting in Ireland. And it's just these amazing opportunities kept coming my way. Every time I would step out in faith, that would be rewarded. And I think that's been a common theme throughout my life uh, since I decided, I think I have this calling to move to Los Angeles and be a filmmaker.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me because then you get to this point where you connect with, Pure Flix, the production house behind God's Not Dead. Talk about that a little bit. How did you find out about the film and what was it that led you to say, I want to direct this?
Sure. So my time in LA, so we moved out there in 2004. The next year, I actually did another short film called War Prayer, inspired by a Mark Twain short story. It was written by Rick Schwartzwalder, who is an incredible Christian writer. Um, and again, my two good friends, Andy and Dave Phelps, back in Michigan, helped produce this film, and I won Best Director at the Beverly Hills Film Festival in 2006. That connected me with a Christian production company that I became a partner in, and I learned so much in my tenure at that company. And then in 2008, Michigan was about to put in some tax incentives. So after spending a couple years at that point in Los Angeles and seeing that a lot of people were just more focused on the lifestyle and about taking meetings and drinking coffee at Starbucks. This is not a Starbucks ad, by the way, but I do like their green tea. Um, that I decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to Michigan. I'm going to put together a group of business partners, investors. I'm going to open a studio facility in Michigan, because growing up in West Michigan, it's an amazing community. I love it here. It's beautiful. The summers are incredible. The winters are is equally as beautiful, but a little cooler. Uh, we got 6 inches of snow yesterday, actually.
Yeah,
Um,
just a little cooler, just a little
right.
cooler.
So I put together this group, Jeff Sang and a couple other folks, Steve Effendulis, entertainment attorney Larry Weinberg, and we set up the studio in West Michigan. And so we started bringing films to West Michigan. And the first film that we were able to bring to our studio was was from my good friend Dallas Jenkins, and the film was called What If. So What If was the first film that we produced at 10 West Studios in Manistee, and that's how I got to meet the guys at Pure Flix, was through Dallas.
So yeah, and obviously Dallas Jenkins has gone on to The Chosen, and there's so much. I love what a small world it is too. The Christian film community, and so many people
Yeah,
who are friends and who have built friendships and worked with one another. And so that's a little cool piece of history there. You go on, you do God's Not Dead, and you've done so much. And as you sort of look at where God has had you, what has been the most rewarding part of making these films for you?
I have just gotten little subtle pieces of confirmation from God that that I'm still doing what he what he wants me to do. I don't know how else to describe it, man. I've look the, everything's not everything's not roses and rainbows over here. It's
Sure.
hard work. It's
Yeah.
rough. It's a struggle. Um, I've never read a review of any of my work, but my friends tell me I shouldn't, because anything that has a faith element to it usually gets destroyed by critics. And you see the discrepancy between how is it possible for something to have a 18% Rotten Tomatoes
Right.
critic score but have an 80 some percent audience score?
And it happens a
So
lot, by the way. That
yeah,
happens, and this. And,
uh,
and anybody watching this right now, the audience loves it. The critics are brutal, right?
yeah. So that's kind of been how I've gauged my successes. I don't look at, like I said, I've never read a single review. I don't listen to the critics. For me, it's two things. It's the audience cinema score, and it's the box office. And um, as long as my films are receiving A or A plus cinema scores, that means the audience that bought the ticket to go see the movie is feeling filled by the film and the message, and that's one of the things that keeps me going. But yeah, just I have a passion for this industry, for telling stories. I feel most alive when I'm on set working with artists to bring stories and characters to life. And
Yeah.
it's been an incredible journey. I'm so thankful. There's been a lot of speed bumps, and we've it's been trying on my faith, um, and but it's always, if you're always going to get sideways, you're always going to get off the path. But if you always come back to, what, God has a purpose for my life, and I'm going to trust in Him and step out in faith. I've time and time again, it's been rewarded.
Well, and I was going to say, this is your journey, right? You had the teaching job. You could have stayed there, finished your career out. You took the step of faith, and you said something else really important. All of us, no matter what we do, whether it's filmmaking, whether it's working at a store, it doesn't matter what we do. If we feel that that's what we're being called to do and we're listening to God, we can be busy doing a lot of things. It doesn't mean that those are the things we should be doing. And so it sounds like your journey has been one of listening and following, and it's not always going to be easy, like you said, but the payoff in knowing that that's where God wants you. I don't want to overlook the fact that in 2014, 2013, 2014, the major impact that came as a result of God's Not Dead. I mean, from your perspective, as the person who directed this project and really brought it to everybody, what do you think the impact was? Because it seems like that was really the start or the reset of a lot of the faith-based projects in Hollywood. I'd love for you to reflect on that a little bit.
Yeah, that question might be a little above my pay grade, but I think I can speak to the moment when the film came out. I think at that time there was really starting to be some negative negative connotations put toward Christians and Christian faith and conservatism, and I think that film gave people a voice at the box office. It made a whole lot of noise. And I just remember thinking, man, people love this film. People love the and people, but people also love the movement behind this film and want to be part of that. And so that I think is what caught people's attention. That there's an audience here that's maybe not being served as much as they should be.
Yeah, and you said the word movement, which is so accurate, right? Because I mean, God's Not Dead has been a series of films now, but that first movie kicked off a real movement of people feeling represented, feeling like they had a voice, feeling like this movie really hit the nail on the head and addressed a lot of the issues that believers were feeling, and that was a huge moment. Now I have to pivot before we conclude here because I want to talk about something else you're working on. You have a new book out. You have a new kids book out. It's called The Beard Ballad. And, now hearing your whole art background, it's really kind of cool to see you move into that direction of a kid's book. It's a very different kind of project. Talk a little bit about The Beard Ballad and why you wrote it.
Yeah, yeah. So for a long time, I had been looking for books to read to my son. I have a 7-year-old son, and there were not very many things out there that were manly and affirming. So one day I picked up Harry and I gave him this great big hug, this bear hug, and my cheek rubbed against his, and he pushed me away. He said, "Daddy, your face is all pokey and rough." And I said, "Yeah, those are my ferocious facial follicles." Okay, so there's something there. So the next day, I went to the coffee shop where I typically write screenplays, and this children's book, The Beard Ballad, just kind of fell out of me. And I just it felt like it was given to me, like it was poured into me, and I'm just like I'm like writing, and so I put it in a desk drawer for a while, and got it out and cleaned it up a little bit a few months later and showed it to people, and they're like, "Wow, man, you really need to do this." And it's this fun, whimsical story about a kid and his dad. And his dad calls into work and says, "I need a beard day to spend with my son." And they go on this manly adventure of chopping wood and growing beards. And and yeah, it kind of falls in line with No Shave November, and it promotes the idea that it's okay to be masculine, and not all masculinity is toxic.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that like there aren't I have 2 daughters, right? So, and like a lot of books are geared towards especially mothers and daughters and even fathers and daughters, but I feel like you don't see as many books for fathers and sons as you do mothers and daughters. And so it's a really unique project. And you had a little support from the Robertsons from the Duck Dynasty family, right?
Yeah, yeah. Phil Robertson was gracious enough to write the foreword for us, and I worked with the family on both God's Not Dead 1 and God's Not Dead 2. Incredible people, and it was so kind and generous of him to do that for me. And yeah, the book promotes. For me, it's about promoting time spent between father and son, because it's so important and it's so precious. I lost my
Yeah,
dad,
absolutely.
in the last couple of years to Alzheimer's, and every day I'm reminded of things that he taught me or shared with me, and the man I am today is I owe so much of that to him. Flaws and all, Dad. Thanks a lot. Um, but but yeah, I wanted to promote a father spending time with sons, because they're going to be faced with so many crazy things in this ever changing world of ours, that if you can create that bond, or that relationship early on, that trust between father and son, as they move through their lives and they're going to face all these crazy things, we should have those young men coming to their dads for advice, for the truth, for information about how they should respond to a certain situation, or not how they should think or feel, but just a father being able to give his son his perspective and advice about what he's been through, so that we prepare them to face those challenges that they're going to see on a daily basis.
Well, I love that. And where can people go if they want to grab copies of that book?
Beardballad.com.
That's easy enough.
You can also find it on
Beardballad.com.
Amazon.
Very good. Very good. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time, taking us through your career, God's Not Dead, and just your journey, and also talking with us about the Beard Ballad.
You got it, Billy. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you.